Hi, and welcome to the Brookdale Visiting Writer Series. My name is Suzanne Parker. I'm an associate professor here in the English department and the director of our creative writing program. I am absolutely thrilled to have on the show today Alex DiFrancesco. Alex is a poet, recently a new poet, a novelist, an essayist, a journalist, and an activist. Most recently, their books are called Psychopomp and the novel All City. And they have a chapbook coming out real soon of poetry that we are looking forward to. So Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. All City is just such a wonderful book. I slammed through it. It was one of those, I sat down, nothing happened for 36 hours kind of books.
Wow, thanks.
It was wonderful.
Such a compliment.
And it has a big story and a lot of characters. So could you maybe kind of describe the story of the book for us?
Sure. So a superstorm hits New York City, and it's a near future New York City in which there is a massive economic divide. So the only people who are left behind after the superstorm hits are the ones who didn't have the means to leave. So we follow quite a few of those folks. It's a story told in by three different narrators. And two of them are from the wrong side of the economic divide. One is a woman named Michaela, who has lived in New York City for her whole life and is being slowly gentrified out of it. And then another one of the narrators is Jesse, who is a genderqueer anarchist punk who lives in an old abandoned train station in the Bronx. And they're friends who they live there with as well. And then our third narrator is from the quote unquote right side of the economic divide. She is a young art collector who has things a lot easier than the other characters do. Yeah, she was able to escape New York. She's living in an in-state compound of her father's for most of the story. But then what ends up happening as the people who are left behind are trying to rebuild the city is that a mysterious street artist starts working in all 5 boroughs. In fact, the title All City is old graffiti slang for an artist who works in all 5 boroughs of New York City, which would be a special kind of feat after a superstorm hits and there's no transit between any of them. So this artist's goal is to bring hope to those who have been left behind. And he begins, I think the first painting that anyone sees is that he paints fruit for everyone because it's been so long since any of them have had fresh fruit. So, and he paints the word hope underneath it. So then this again kind of brings back the attention of those who have left, like our art collector Yvonne. And there is a bit of a clash between the haves and the have-nots that happens towards the end of the book.
Yeah. It opens with the storm, and the storm is wonderful. You write a very good storm. And New York itself is such a fantastic character in the book, you know, wounded and hobbled in a way, and then coming back. So I just wondered, were you in New York for Hurricane Sandy? What's your relationship to New York City? Because have you been to that subway in Bronx? Because you can do that subway tour underneath of the illegal spelunking.
So I lived in New York City for 16 years. I moved there when I was 18 years old, and I lived there until just a few years ago. And I was there for Sandy. In fact, I did a lot of activism around Sandy because I was living in Astoria, which was not hit very hard at all, but by plugging into existing channels that were set up from the Occupy Wall Street days, I was able to kind of start channeling donations and volunteers down to not to Astoria, to Rockaway Beach, which was hit very hard. So that really kind of opened my eyes to the sort of havoc that climate change was, you know, reaping on New York. And I started writing the book right around then.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, not long after that. And another thing that was happening that is where the artist piece came from was that Banksy was doing his residency.
So is it Banksy? Okay, I kind of want.
I mean, it's not Banksy, but I mean, he was doing his residency in New York City, his quote unquote residency, where
and he's a famous graffiti artist.
Yeah, and
international.
He every day was installing a new piece around New York at an undisclosed location. And it was so exciting. I was working at the Strand the giant bookstore in New York.
Yeah.
And I would run to my register shift every day because I worked in the basement and I had no cell phone reception. And I would run to my register shift every day and like Google like where Banksy's new installation was. So that was happening right around then too. So that inspired the book a lot as well.
That got
Yeah.
the artist. I did kind of wonder. I was like,
Yeah.
because there's a Basquiat, but also it seemed like the Bansky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wow, you started writing this soon after Sandy.
Yeah, which was in 2012, like 7 years ago now.
I think so,
Not
right,
long
yeah.
after Sandy. Yeah.
Wow. So the book itself has this large cast of characters, and as you said, each chapter, until they come together later, sort of rotates from the different point of view. So was that your idea the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of, I mean, I know this sounds a little, I'm sure you're used to hearing authors talk in like semi-mystical terms about how their ideas
go
come
nuts.
to them. But, you know, I heard these voices telling this story before I knew the entirety of the story. Like I knew these were the people who were telling this story. And one of my goals at that time as a writer was to insert transgender narratives into popular like literary type speculative work, and not just, you know, to insert these narratives into it, but also to put them very like front and center in a story. So Jesse's character was really important to me, and I always knew who Jesse was, and I always had Jesse's voice down. The one who was
From
actually,
the beginning idea of the novel, or this was a character you already had in your head?
No, like from when I started writing the novel, like
Gotcha.
Jesse's voice was just there. And the one who I had the hardest time with was Yvonne, the rich art
Yvonne's hard.
collector.
Yeah.
I wrote Yvonne about 15 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, how did you know that Yvonne was going to be there?
Again, just kind of one of the voices the story came in. Originally, the first draft, and I use draft very loosely in this instance, was a National Novel Writing Month draft.
You did that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was 40,000 words in 30 days. It was a mess. It was not a good draft, but all the voices were there. And all of the story was there. It's just they had to be fleshed out after that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So these ghosts, these voices that you heard, are they based on people you know, or were they just literally they came to me and started whispering in my ears?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there is I went to a private liberal arts school for my undergrad, and I remember there was a few things put into Yvonne that I had, encountered in that environment, and
Some very privileged folks.
some very privileged folks. And Yvonne had a few of those voices as well, but again, Yvonne was the hardest one for me, because Yvonne is the character that by all means is the least like me and the least easy for me to get inside what her mind was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't like her.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but what's wonderful is she's not a cookie cutter villain. You know, she does change, think, explore within her limitations. You know? And she does change, because in the beginning you just really don't like her.
Yeah.
And it's a counterpoint to all this suffering that's going on, and here she is in her position of privilege in her safe compound, worried about her, her apartment and what's on the walls when people are drowning and experiencing these terrible things.
Yeah, she's not very likable.
Yeah, she's not.
But the thing that to me really I kept coming back to was that she has an emptiness, and all of her consumption was an attempt to fill that emptiness. So where does that emptiness come from, and how, is her love of the things that she loves a real love, despite the fact that she's terrible? So those were all like things that I kept coming back to with her.
Well, you hear actors talking about that. Someone who's playing a serial killer is, or horrible, horrible characters. Like, well, I'm not a serial killer, but I can relate to. I have to find the humanity in the most despicable of characters.
Yeah,
Not that she's a
absolutely.
serial killer. But,
No, she's not.
Is art important to you?
Art is really important to me, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's something that I care about a lot. I'm in an MFA program now, and one of my electives this semester is actually a class on African American art. So we're studying all like the art of Africa and how the slave trade brought it through the Americas, and how it was changed and how it stayed the same. And it's just really beautiful and incredible. And it's the first time I've actually studied art, like in any like way other than going to a museum or reading a book.
Yeah.
So it's really wonderful, but art is very important to me, yeah.
Gotcha. So you're in an MFA program now, and yet you've already got your 1, 2, 3 books published already. Are we doing this a bit backwards?
Well, you know, I had always wanted to be a teacher, and I had always wanted to teach creative writing, which you can't really do without an MFA.
Yeah.
But I was always serious about writing. After I finished my undergrad study, I joined a writers group that met every Monday, and I was in that for several years. And a lot of really wonderful books came out of that writers group, and a lot of really wonderful writers in it as well. And they really kept me on track, and so much of All City would not be what it was without those folks.
Did you workshop this book with them?
Yeah.
The whole thing, chapter
Yeah.
by chapter
Yep.
kind of thing? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Twice.
Twice? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it go through a lot of revision then?
It did. I think there was probably about 5 or 6 versions of it.
Yeah.
And then it got to my publisher, and my editor thought Yvonne was still a little too terrible. So Yvonne got reworked one more time after that. She didn't have a dog before that. But
Give her a dog. We'll like her better. She's got a dog.
I wanted to show her loving something in real time. And I was like, who could hate a cute dog that looks like a teddy bear? Like, we've got to soften her up somehow. So she's got a little teddy bear dog in the last draft.
That's hysterical that the dog is there to make her more likable.
Yeah.
That's great. That is great. Wow. Well, when we come back from the break, I want to talk more about this and also about Psychopomps, your collection of essays, which I believe came out all within the same year, correct? Wow, you've had a busy year.
It's been busy, yeah.
It has been. All right, great. Well, you're watching the Visiting Writer Series show, and please join us after break.
My name is Raquel, I'm 23 years old and I'm from Brazil. When I first got here in New Jersey, I was looking for a community college in the area, and I got really great feedbacks from some of my friends that had an experience here at Brookdale. I came here a few times before I applied to the college. I talked with advisors and I talked in the international department, and they were all so welcoming. They guided me through all the steps that I needed to have in order to get my student visa. Only good things have been happening here. I always get impressed with how everybody is so friendly here, how everybody really wants to see us to excel and to succeed in our career. The classes are small, the professors know us by name. I think that everybody here really wants to see us to succeed in our academic life.
In today's workforce, competition is fierce. If you need a competitive edge, earn a credential that sets you apart and brings you closer to your goals. At Brookdale, we offer a variety of short-term certifications in a wide range of fields. From social media and architecture to culinary arts and cybersecurity, we help you get trained, get certified, and get ahead. This is Brookdale. College redefined, success reimagined. Take your next step at brookdalecc.edu. They come to Brookdale with a passion for healthcare, cybersecurity, fashion merchandising. They graduate and transfer to universities like Georgetown, NJIT, and the Fashion Institute of Technology. They begin their careers as registered nurses, security engineers, and fashion designers. This is what success looks like. And here is where it all starts. This is Brookdale. College redefined, success reimagined. Take your next step at brookdalecc.edu.
Hi, and welcome back to the Brookdale Visiting Writer Series show. My name is Suzanne Parker, and I direct the creative writing program here at Brookdale. And I am talking to Alice DiFrancesco, the author of the absolutely wonderful novel, All City. So, welcome back. Thanks. All City is kind of a dystopian novel in the Orwell, Atwood, Handmaid's Tale kind of way. I really feel like when Hulu's done with Handmaid's Tale. They should do you next.
I mean, if you could get in touch with them and let them know, I'd be really excited.
I can
about
absolutely, because there's so many moving pieces. It would make a great miniseries.
Yeah, I think that it would actually make a good miniseries, if I do say so myself. Yeah, I mean, it's a story that intentionally attempted to weave a lot of things around a very solid plot. So there's like social issues, and there's a lot of them. There's art, there's community building, and it's all woven in and out of a story. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on in it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think dystopian novels often are also quite political. Do you think of this as a political book?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah?
And I think my publisher, Seven Stories, publishes mostly what they consider work of the radical imagination is their kind of tagline. So they do a lot of like leftist work. And I do really think of it as a political novel. And I think that, you know, it's very hard for me to do things that aren't political, just by virtue of being a trans person in the world. I kind of tend to see things in a way that is maybe a little outside your average kind of purview of the world. And yeah, so I get political pretty often.
Do you feel that that's necessary for you in your writing? That you're speaking for people who maybe aren't speaking, can't speak, don't have access to the ability to kind of voice things for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I do. When I started writing this book, I felt like there was not as many trans voices as there are now. There's quite a few really wonderful and amazing trans writers out there in the world and working currently, and it's just a beautiful thing to see so many of them. But when I was writing this book originally, about 6-7 years ago, I just very much wanted a non-binary trans character to be like front and center in a work of fiction. And because I wasn't seeing a lot of it, I was like, well, I guess I'll do that then.
To make it,
Yeah.
Have you seen, so you touched on this, that the publishing world has changed a bit, because I know Lambda Literae, which is, I don't even know, the GLBTQ plus writing organization, they have book awards specifically for transgendered writing, but I don't think that dates back all that far, that category.
I don't think it goes back very far either, and I know bisexual categories also don't go back very far in Lambda. So a lot of it was like gay fiction, lesbian fiction, queer fiction, but I don't think the trans and bi categories go back a terribly long time.
I don't think more than like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So you've been seeing a shift then?
I think so. I think that there's just a lot of people who are stepping up, and it's mostly the indie world. Like, indies are really like carrying a lot of the weight of cultural representation in a lot of capacities and doing such good work. And it's really amazing. And the bigger presses are starting to, but I feel like with indies, there's just, you know, a lot of times it's like less run like a giant business, like the big presses are.
For sure.
And there's less of a bottom line of how much money is this going to make us? And is this for a niche audience? As if, you know, the only people that read trans fiction are trans people, when that's absolutely not true, but that's somehow the sort of line that's out there. Yeah.
Do you feel when you're writing, and particularly when you're writing the character in this book, Jesse, do you feel like you have to do a certain amount of correcting of assumptions?
I think with Jesse, that was actually easier for me than when I was writing my essay collection. Jesse is a lot braver than me. So Jesse just kind of is who they are without any sort of qualifications about it or any, you know, backing down on who they are. In fact, Jesse is intentionally in your face about pretty much everything about their identity. I'm not. I mean, there certainly was a time in my life when I was, but I'm a little older now, so I think that's calmed down a little. But, you know, I felt, you know, when I was writing Psychopomps that there was a lot that I had to explain, like, you know.
This is your essay collection.
Yeah, that's my essay collection. And it's like, you know, being a non-binary, non-monogamous, trans, queer activist, there's a lot there that is not what your average kind of person on the street necessarily is acquainted with. And I felt that there were times when I had to explain that in
Sure.
my essay collection, just for the sake of clarity.
Well, it's actually, it's a great read, and I think it's an important essay collection. How did that one come together then?
The publisher, The Accomplices, used to be, before that they were called, The Accomplices is like the conglomerate publisher. Before that, they were Civil Coping Mechanisms Press.
So you said that super fast. They were what?
Civil Coping Mechanisms Press.
Civil Coping Mechanisms Press.
Yeah. And Civil Coping Mechanisms used to do this contest where they would have a week of open submissions, and in that week they would read everything that came in on a daily basis and announce the front runners who were the top like 5 for that day. And at the end, they offered the top one a book and then picked a few runners up.
It seems like a reality TV show of literary submissions.
Kind of, yeah. And so I entered Psychopomps in that as a chapbook, and I entered 30 seconds before the contest opened on Monday morning, and I was a front runner all week. And then on the last day, I got an email from the publisher that was like, so the reason you didn't win is because we don't publish chapbooks, but if you want to make this a full length, like, we totally want to publish.
That's wonderful.
It was really great, yeah. They put a lot of like faith in that work that they didn't need to, and it was really great of them. Yeah.
The essays in it are quite wide-ranging. So did they come from a longer period of your life? Were you pulling from some of the journalism that you've done, or how did the individual essays get collected between those covers? Or were they all written specifically with that in mind?
They were not all written specifically with that in mind, but a few of them, like one of them had been published in Long Reads a few years before, and that became...
Which is a literary journal.
Yeah, and that became a opening essay. And then another one I had sold to another literary journal, and they axed it before it was published.
Did you get to keep the check?
I got to keep a kill fee, yes,
right.
which was not the entirety of what they were supposed to pay me, but it was more than enough. It paid for all the research and writing. So that was the last essay for Bobby with Love, about the man who was murdered in my hometown when I was 5 years old. The gay man who was murdered in my hometown.
Yeah.
And
that's a wonderful essay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so that had been for another magazine, but I knew that it was like a very important part of the overall goal, which was building connections between not just like living trans and queer folks, but like ones from the past and also ones from the far past in a sense of like spirituality. So that kind of project of the book became clear as I started piecing together some of the things I'd been writing.
Yeah. If you kind of had to touch on one of the major themes in Psychopomps, what would you say?
I would say that the major theme is the fact that trans people, while we may not have the most, elevated role in current society, have been around for a long, long time and once had an incredibly special spiritual role in many societies. And the fact that trans people are now currently in a position where we support each other and we form families and we care for each other in ways that society often does not care for us is all a continuation of that.
Yeah. Which one feels riskier to you, writing the fiction or the essays?
Risky how?
Part of me is like, in an essay, you've got the mask. You can kind of hide behind your characters, but in an essay, it's out there.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of the, I don't have a filter as much about my personal life. So I don't feel revealed by these essays. I really I would have a conversation where I said the same things with almost anybody. So it was basically like a way of having a large scale conversation, writing essays for me. Actually, the fiction felt a little riskier, I would say.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
It's just, this is a world that I created, and it's basically, I feel like as a novelist, you take your whole life and everything you've read and everything you've researched, you kind of throw it against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
There's a lot more at risk there. It's like, what if I just like really lousy things, and like I've been collecting all this like stuff from the world, and like this filter is somehow incorrect. I don't know. That just, it feels like a risk.
Everyone's going to see my bad taste. I have a bad imaginative life. Well, you don't. It's a great book.
Yeah, thank you.
We've only got 1 or 2 minutes left, but would you like to talk about your upcoming chapbook?
Sure. It's called Bird is the Word, and it is about Iggy Pop singing the song Surfin' Bird to his cockatoo, Biggie Pop. And it's just a series of poems about basically a Facebook video of Iggy Pop singing to his bird.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Was there a poet you were reading, or you were inspired by, or you were modeling after?
No, it's just that I took a class where we had to write about the same thing all semester long, and I was like, I want to write something that brings me joy, and this brings me a lot of joy.
Did it?
Yeah.
Because I know in an interview you said quite adamantly, I will never write poetry.
That
Never.
was before I started writing about Iggy and Biggie Pop.
What was it that freed you there?
I really think it was the subject. Like,
It's just fun.
Yeah, it was so much fun that to me, like, poetry has become surely about writing about joy. And I don't get that in a lot of my other work. So it's a really nice change of pace.
Gotcha. And what are you working on now?
I am working on a Pennsylvania Gothic sci-fi novel, which is not only told in short prose poem sections.
Oh, see, the poetry's still there.
The poetry came back, but also I have a couple really wonderful artist friends who do photography and collage art, who have similar themes that are in the book. So it includes a lot of that. Hopefully, will include a lot of their work as well.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Well, and what's the date and the publisher for the poetry collection?
That would be, it's coming out in November from Bone and Ink Press, and it is called Bird is the Word once again.
Well, I look forward to that and this mixed media book that's coming out. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Again, please check out our Visiting Writer series here at Brookdale, and as well our creative writing program. We offer classes in all things creative, and you don't need to be an enrolled student to take them, so please check us out. And thanks for watching.